So it's already the last session, our communication for today, and we are pleased to welcome Nikos Kalampalikis for this last communication, professor of social psychology in the laboratory of the GREPS, Groupe de Recherche en Psychologie Sociale at Lyon 2, and his presentation will address theoretical challenges with social representations. So, Nikos, I leave you the floor, and you will have 1 hour with the time for a discussion with the audience.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, Thibaut, and thank you for the invitation also. We'll share a screen with my presentation. Est-ce que c'est bon pour vous? Est-ce que vous voyez
Oui, c'est parfait, on la voit bien.
Okay, parfait. Thank you so much for the invitation. I will try to share with you some ideas. I don't know if we are going to talk really about these famous theoretical challenges, but I will try to put some ideas that are in development here in my talk. It's some ideas that I have already shared with people here in France, but also in Latin America. And I will be delighted to have also your questions to me and your ideas, maybe. So, and if something is not very clear, just tell me. I will begin with the main idea with the end of my talk, and the main idea is the fact that the areas of uncertainty surrounding the theory of social representations, maybe this thing constitutes its driving forces, its theoretical challenges. In other words, its past, present, and future. And I will try to prove it. What types of uncertainty for this theoretical paradigm? We have 3 kinds of uncertainty at least: historical, epistemological, and the current one. First, historical because necessarily epistemological also because this theory did not immediately attract the interest of the humanities and social science, even less so social psychology, which was looking for its own scientific origin. For some people, it was too sociological, for other people, not psychological enough. And let's also say that at this moment, at the 60s at least, it was the emerging also area of social psychology. Historical one and epistemological current one, because we are still living in a post-pandemic turning point. From psychology, we can say maybe that we can observe at least many references, even epistemological one, behaviorism, even the name behavior. The name behavior is more present than some years ago. From social psychology, we have also something going into scientism, all the articles published in peer-reviewed count, for example, and maybe the fact, for me, is the most crucial, the fact that we are overlooking now today's crucial social problem. We have many crucial social problems in different continents and in different countries. The current type of uncertainty is our relation also to information and to knowledge. In the age of artificial intelligence, of course, in the age, and I have some images of infomania, in the age of conspiracy theories, our relation to nature, to the climate crisis, for example, but also our relation to others, to ourselves, in the age of social networks. Our relation to politics and to history in the area of rising populism and extremes in different countries, including France, versus effectively the fact that we overlook today's crucial social problems. What kinds of uncertainty? Let's stay some seconds to infodemic, for example, with some images. And I think it's not very useful to remind you the power of images and the crucial role of images in our studies, in social psychology, in social representation in general. Maybe after the pandemic, we don't have a pandemic, but we have an infodemic, the fact that we have many informations around us and around people with which we are working, with social groups, for example. So we are obliged to take this into account in order to know how people with which we are working, for example, in research, are informed about things and about their own reality, their own actuality. We have also some type of tensions within the theory, historical, epistemological, and theoretical tensions. You know better than me that when we are looking at the history of social psychology and social representations, mainly, somebody can find some words of cities, for example, in different chapters, in different manuals. For example, Paris, for example, Aix-en-Provence, for example, Geneva, without any commentary on this. Or words as institution, EHSS in Paris, in France, Université de Provence before in France, University of Geneva, without knowing why. Some authors, names of authors, Jodelet, Adrias, Markova, who some approaches, for example, anthropological, structural, dynamic, dialogical, etc. But we have to go beyond words and beyond names in order to understand why this is happening historically and in the present also, of course. We have also some limits and some taboos, because there is a great deal of research that does not fit into these distinctions. For example, people are not working only with structural approach, people are not working only with anthropological or modeling approach or other dialogical approach. So we need also to have a kind of integrative approaches in working with social representation. And we have also some taboo, mainly one of the first, it's like Mr. Risi said, the taboo of history, common to all the science, is the foundation of the practical epistemology. Maybe we can discuss about this after, if you want. But we have to deal also with this taboo of history. The historical phases in the emergence of social representation theory, I tried in a chapter in the last book in French of Moscovici to make a distinction of this kind of period. Let's take this kind of categorization, this kind of distinction with 20 years, for example. From 60s to 80s, for example, it was the final moment of the emergence of the theory of social representation. Because they have to, epistemologically speaking, orient social psychology as a discipline, but they had also to give it a subject of its own, an epistemological origin, depending on the theory of social knowledge. This was the first period. The second period, from the 80s to 2000, federated moment of the social representation theory, because we have networks, we have communities, we have distribution channel, we have many publications, we have different studies, and we have also training, as yours, the institutionalization of the theory, the paradigm of social representation. And we have also the third period. Maybe this period is already end. Maybe we must think about the next one, in which we are actually, for example. But this is an open question also for discussion. The moment of concentration of social representation theory, with Moscovici's work, with different prices, but also the work, as he said, also of a collective, of group of people, and also the reorientation of social science in general. What kind of reorientations? But the fact that, for example, we are working since many years now, but mostly these last years, to common object. Alfred Schultz said that all social science are objective meaning context of subjective meaning context. The fact that we have this common object with which we are working, not only in social psychology, of course, and not only in social representations, of course. We have some common object also in sociology, in anthropology, or even in... So we have to work with other disciplines also. This is two books that we are talking also about this. So, three questions. What is the added value of social representations approach and the effective examination, both conceptual and empirical, of this common object? What is the specific status of the object for the psychology of social representations? And third question, there are different ways of working with objects within the social representation tradition. We can discuss also about these questions, about the kind of answers that we can give to these questions. But a statement made by Moscovici, for example, social representations are supposed to attribute to ideas, but also, and above all, to objects, properties that do not exist in any form or appearance. Kind of enigmatic statement, but this is a kind of statement that for us, all of us, it's extremely important in order also to put in work this kind of idea about the fact that our social representations do not exist in any form or appearance. So our populations, our groups, our individuals are working with social representations, but without seeing them. We have tried to make a synthesis of these kind of ideas recently with Tenis and Soulidis. For example, going back to a first summary in '84 that have been made by Denis Jodelet, trying to underline a kind of school of work into the actual, at the moment, tradition of social representations. It was the area of study of social representations in a real environment. That was the word of Jodelet. And of course, the specification of this was the type of object chosen as target for representation, situated, holistic, complex object, system, for example, a scientific theory, culture, woman, children, health, body, justice, etc. And we have, of course, different famous authors on this, with famous work on this, and the choice of material used to study them: verbal, spontaneous, from interviews, iconographic, documentary, epistolary, etc. So this was the first summary made by Jodelet in '94. So the sociogenetic, as we called, has at least two meanings, the sociogenetic approach. To grasp the presentation of an object as a dynamic phenomenon, its genesis as a trajectory in the present and in history, its expression as social and practical knowledge, free of historical, political, and cultural conjectures, and of social communication. But the second meaning also, it's about the genesis of the theory itself in the history and present of ideas within the social science. And we have made two chapters with there is a possibilities on this. So we have a postulate, it's called corollaries. The postulate about this approach is the fact that all representational objects have areas of tension running through them. So any representational object is tensional. For us, it's extremely important. And the corollaries, the fact that these areas of tension are essential not only to the nature of the object in question, but also to the nature of the way we look at it. They are also the fruit of the constitutive nature of social representations, and they are studied also using a range of appropriate methodological tools. And I will go back to this after some minutes. So, all representational objects have areas of tension running through them. We can discuss about three areas of tension. One is linked to the status of the object in the social and cultural sphere, but also collective and subjective. The second is related to the nature of social representations. And the third is related to the status of the look or the regard deployed to observe, to study, to analyze the object. Let's give also some example. Personally, I'm working with this kind of thing since many years now, gamete donation, for example. The fact that Jodelet said that the same object or event taken from different horizons give rise to exchange, interpretation, confrontation of position through which individuals express an identity and a sense of belonging. And we can observe also the influence also of politics, namely for this kind of object, these days in different countries in the world, not only in Europe. Second area of tensions, the formation and the functioning of social representations in social subjects. For example, let's take the example in which we have worked also and published of medicalized male contraception. This is a very nice promising that have been made medical one since at least 20 years now. But this was never, until now, at least, seen concrete reality. So, we have some basic theoretical assumptions, given the fact that we are working in social representations and mainly with this approach, with complex objects. We can see this with madness, with wonderful work that Jodelet have made, the body, of course, also identity, kinship, but also ecology, for example. And if somebody is looking for theoretical challenges, he or she can find. I mean, we have talked about representational project. We have talked about representational system. We have talked also about total social representations with the help also of the work of Marcel Mauss. The third area of tension is the methodological one. The fact that in this approach, and not only, of course, we are working with a methodological polytheism, using mixed methodologies, using, for example, different kinds also of triangulation. I'm not going to read the diapositive, but I imagine that you can see what I am talking about this, why I am talking about this, and what I have to say about this. I can only say also that we can observe in social psychology, in social representations also, these last years, a kind of obsession with methodology. Let's go out to obsession, and we can discuss also with you if you want. But the main idea here is that this kind of, the third area of tension, it's about this methodological, as Nikos called it, polytheism. The sociogenetic perspective implies an holistic viewpoint and a polymorphous methodological approach to dealing with representative phenomena quantitative. It invite us to break out of the traditional compartments and venture into an open-air social psychology. So it has to do also with the look, the regard that we are, with which we are working in social psychology. And ultimately enable us to take a contextualizing, comprehensive, interpretative look at social thought that is so effective in our ordinary relations with the world, the daily experience that shapes life in society. So let's go also a little bit to sociology of science, Thomas Kuhn. When he said, he wrote that under normal conditions, the scientific researcher is not an innovator, but someone who solves enigmas. And the enigmas to which he devotes himself are precisely those which, in his opinion, can be both formulated and solved within the existing scientific tradition. For us, for me, it's extremely important. Because, of course, we can test limits of our own theory. But we can search also to make some kind of innovation from inside, and not only from outside. And we can try to understand the complexity of the social and psychological phenomena with which we are working. I think this is one of the most important things to do. Explanations of social representation theory. Moscovici said that the theory of social representation is one of the few, and not only in psychology, to offer an explanation and a language commensurate with the problems of contemporary society. So we must prove it today more than yesterday. Our theory, it continues in a text book that has been published some years ago. Our theory proposed to study not atoms of perception, information, memory, etc., but human groups. Human groups seeking to understand the role, each in their own particular way, the diversity of representation that make of it. It objectifies them by overcoming the dilemma of ordinary life. And I think this is extremely important, this idea of the dilemmatic nature of ordinary life. It's extremely useful also, even from a methodological point of view. So, the drivers of the theory is the problems of our own society. I will not read all of this, but the main idea is this: the fact that we have a society in which we have many different problems, economic one, cultural one, immigration problems, many different climate problems, many different kinds of problems, and we must deal with this kind of problems, given the fact that people are interested by this problem. So we have to dare to propose and dare to innovate. Personally, I think that we can try to do it with a more efficient way from within and not from the outside. This is what we had tried to do some years ago in a paper with Apostolides and Santos, Santos, for example, with the paradoxical social representations hypothesis. Given the fact that with the COVID pandemic, we saw that things were extremely different than in normal ordinary life. And we had in this tradition of social representation already the idea of these paradoxical social representations by Moscovici many years ago. I will not read this neither, but Denis Jodelet, for example, proposed also some years ago the idea of ignorance, of agnotology, the fact that without knowing, for example, we have an idea, we have a position about object, about social object. So our work here, for us, working in social psychology with social representations, is to see what kind of knowledge or absence of knowledge is in the hands, for example, of our subject or of our groups. So Moscovici, in a text that we have published some years ago, it was a text that has never been published before, said that far from regretting, I would recommend, he said, the complexity of our theory. Because like any complex theory, it can tolerate several versions. You have to be in very bad faith to accept that the theory of social representation is not unique, because it's not uniform. And when it comes to theory, we have to be for life. So this kind of complexity, I think it's I found this kind of choice that we must make, and we can discuss also about this. We can work with very simple things, but mostly wrong. But we can also make some difficult choices of working with complex objects in a complex way, but it's the right way. So we have to do this kind of choice. So I will try to stop here and maybe discuss with you this kind of ideas of these kind of theoretical challenges of social representation theory. Thank you so much for your last also citation reference to Moscovici in this text. When he wrote in French, oui, l'organisation sociale comme une manière de rendre le monde habituel plus passionnant. So this is a kind of difficult idea for us, how this kind of social representations can make our ordinary world more passionnant, more passion. So thank you very much for your attention. Some reference. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikos, for your presentation, and I'm sure we will have some questions in the audience. Yes.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It's very clear, very interesting. I am a sociologist, and listening to your presentation, there is a great resonance with the concept and the framing that I use when I think to reality and when I'm doing my research. And it's difficult for me to understand the difference between social representation and social construction of the reality. Because when you speak in my discipline, I would change, if I change social representation and social construction of reality, for me it's not a big difference in the global approach. Perhaps there is some nuances, some little difference. But if perhaps if I use if I write from a theoretical point of view, I can pay attention to the difference. But if I imagine, if I have to project a research, for me the frame is the same. The only difference, and this is that I think to social construction of reality and not to social representation, but I can use social representation, and for me it's not a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
But I imagine from an empirical point of view, I think it's only a change of the vocabulary, an issue of different formation, different disciplines, if you want. But for me, it's the same. And my question is, I well understood your presentation. I said something that is not true, that is better.
Okay, thank you for your question. I think that we don't have an enormous baggage of difference between them. We have the same epistemological and even historical trajectory between Berger and Luhmann, for example, the social construction of reality and the construction or theory of social representation. The main difference for me is the fact that social representation is a theory. So you have a construction of different kinds of things into the theory. You have the process, you have the content, you have the methods. You have a whole construction that you cannot easily find with in Berger and Luhmann, for example. But the idea of the social construction of reality, I think that it will be extremely difficult to find difference between them. Nevertheless, the fact that we are working in social psychology with social representation is also. So this is a very useful point for me because this can show also the relation with other disciplines in social science, like sociology. The difference is the fact that in social representation we have a construction of a whole as a theory, with some theoretical assumptions, and with some also methodological tools. I have tried to show also that we are using different tools, and you can be extremely, sorry for the expression, you have the right also to ask the question, okay, but also with methodological polytheism, we have a social science mixed methodologies, for example. So why are we using? Of course, it's not a problem of using just for using. It's using with, like others are doing.
Only one thing after I finished. The only risk I have is not in working with other disciplines, but in my disciplines, because scholars of sociology that are focused on media, if I use representation, they have the impression that the terms evokes something like image and not construction. Only like the process is more superficial, but for all the other aspect, methodology, mixed methodology, I have the impression that we are more similar to the social psychology that is the same. For me,
if you permit, only to say that with this kind of social psychology, because social psychology, you have many different theories, and every theory is not, for me at least, extremely open to social science. Theory of social representation, it's a theory extremely open to other social science. So to find similarities with Berger, Luhmann, of course, with its methodologies, with, of course. You said also about imaginary, ideation collective, imaginary. Maybe, but I'm not so sure.
It's the same for me. Thank you very much.
For me, it's a privilege. It's also an advantage of this, the fact that it's very clear and very near to other social science.
Thank you very much.
There are any questions? Yes.
Hi, Nikos. Hi, Nikos. Sarah, grazie. I have two questions. One was a kind of clarification about your finding the solutions. You said finding the solutions from the inside. So what does it mean, this inside? The second, that you were making the different phases, and but you didn't define, or you didn't try to describe what is now, what is happening now in the or regarding the theory.
Thank you also so much for these questions. Listen, with the second one. I don't know what happens now. It's not my own decision, it's not my own deal with this. I mean, we must collectively say something and think something about now. But this is a very strange period also, and we have to think what is going on now. Because we have this infodemia, for example, we have this kind of influence also in general of artificial intelligence. We have another relation of people with the screen, with the fact or not to read something, with the very strong power of images also, and the circulation extremely rapidly of images now through social networks also. So it's really, I think we are in a very strange, unique period, and we must think between us in which phase we are now when we are working with social presentation. But I don't have the answer. The innovation from inside is the fact that we can try also for people working, for example, with social presentation, but in sociology, I think you can say exactly the same thing. Take a look also to the past, to the history, and see some ideas that have been proposed. For example, I have said, and I know if everybody it's okay with this, the fact that we have also, we can observe also today, a kind of obsession of methodology. You know, tell me exactly with which tool you are working, with which logiciel, software, in order to say to you if your findings, your results are correct or no, or are revolutionary or no. I think it's a kind of exaggeration. And innovation from inside. For example, this is a question that I want to ask not only to you, of course, but to all of you. Do you have heard already the expression and the methodological tool of, I will say it in French for the moment, cahier questionnaire?
Yeah.
Okay? Sorry?
Okay.
Not really, what is the...
The cahier is the book.
Cahier question, yeah? Cahier.
Yes, cahier is a questionnaire. This is a tool, for example, maybe nobody here can remind this, but, or know this, but everybody in social presentations is talking about psychoanalysis of Mussolini 61. Yeah, but this was one of the tools that he used in order to make interviews, for example. In order to make interviews, but also to propose to people to answer to a questionnaire, you know. So, when I'm saying let's go back also and make some innovation from inside, see what happened also in last 30, 40, even the half century in different studies. Not only to search for the innovation from the outside, you know, with some beautiful words and some beautiful publications, but also to see and to know a little bit of history. That's all. From a methodological but also conceptual point of view.
Hello, Nikos, thank you for your presentation, very clear, very interesting. I was wondering if you could do the difficult exercise to place the sociogenetic approach among the other approaches to social representation, because in my opinion, it encompasses all the others.
Thank you for your question. It's not a competition. I mean, we are not in a competition. We have tried simply to put in words the fact that this kind of approach was already existing. So it's not very new. We have tried to put some words in ways existed already for doing social presentational work, for example. So it's not very new, not at all an innovation, not at all. It's a synthesis of existing things, that's all. But for me, it was never, and it will be never, for me, a competition with other approaches. And personally, I have worked for my PhD with Denis Jodelet, and I have done also my habilitation there with Jean-Claude Abry. So I have no problems and no problem to work with others in social presentation tradition. And the main idea is how to work more efficiently with about the object, about the questions, about the problems of people. So it's the object, the main, and not the approach.
A word more. Yes, I agree with you because, in my opinion, it's a question of level of explanation.
Of course, it's extremely important. Let's put the things in a very, very important and solid way. The level of explanation must be also, for me, the basis of our reflection. In which level we are going to be situated in order to deal with this kind of object and this kind of questions about the object. The main for me, the main idea, the main interest is the fact that we have problems. It's something problematic for our subjects, for our social groups, and our job is to analyze this problematic nature of things. That's all. That's all. If we are going to use structural panoply or sociogenetic or dynamic one, or I don't care personally.
Hi, Nikos. It's Mauro here. Okay, we are all a bit tired now, so just I want to ask a clarification about what you said about history. No? Because in one sense, I think you already said something. No? We are losing our own history. For example, my personal obsession is with Gestalt, which we studied the first year in psychology, but as some kind of visual trick, but it actually is much richer, and I see a lot of resonance with systemic approach that now seem to be reinvented. No? So I think there is something related with our own history, disciplinary history, history of ideas, but also something related with the history of the object that we are studying, or the place that we are, in which we are in history. Now I'm looking at Subas, who is working on the colonial, post-colonial, and history there is crucial. We've been talking with also, as regard with Gordon Samut, as regard the geopolitics, how geopolitics affect our way of thinking. So somehow it seems that history needs also relate again, something that maybe we forgot, with the big history that is happening outside our faculties, let's say. And, I mean, today there is something happening in China which is, I think, relevant to all of us. Yesterday was the parade, the military yesterday. Just want a comment on this. I mean, what do you mean with history and the taboo of history? I think it can be relevant also for our student here. Thanks.
Thank you, Mauro. Yes, of course, you're absolutely right. I think that this can be related with the first question about the social construction of reality. It's extremely important for us to have the historical level of reflection about the construction of the object as such, for the subject, for the groups with which we are working. That for me it's a basic statement, at a basic level, sorry. Secondly, in my presentation also I try to underline the need, the necessity of studying also the history of social science, of social psychology, of social representations. Not to take this as a fact. You know, this has been done, so we can go further. Of course, we are going further and we must go further, of course, but we must also take a look at the past. We must be aware of this past. So, for example, the fact that we are dealing enormously today with infodemic, with fake news, etc., with rumors, for example. So, what this can be, what this kind of phenomena, how this kind of phenomena can sensibilize us working in social psychology and working in social representations about real social objects. That's all. That's all.
Thank you for your presentation. You mentioned the importance of tensions, right, in our work. And I mean, Professor Mauro also mentioned that I work with the Decolonial Project, and seeing the representation, social representations of academics and how they perceive themselves in this, you know, very westernized space which we are in. And my question is, how do you deal with these tensions? I mean, for example, when in social representations we talk about objects, in decolonization we talk about the idea that I'm a non-object because I'm a colonized being, therefore I'm not even human. You see, so there are a lot of contradictions between these two movements because, yes, in a way they both talk about how do we represent ourselves in our communities, in our spaces, but also they're contradictory. And I mean, I think it's really difficult to be generative with those tensions. So I'm curious, how do you deal with those moments?
I don't have any magical solution for this, but the fact is, by listening to you, I think that we are dealing, for example, in these studies, important studies on post-colonial past, for example, we are dealing with geopolitics, as Mauro said, but most of all, we are dealing with identity, okay? So it's about the social construction of identity. It's about the historical construction also of identity. Maybe sometimes it's a national one, sometimes it's a regional one, sometimes it's a very local one, but it's about identity. So maybe people have different ways of defining themselves from an identitary point of view. But the main object here is about identity. I think that this is a very interesting also area for us in social psychology and social presentations, because many researchers, I can think also of Michael Billig, of Glenys Bradwell, have tried to make also some articulation between social identity theory and social representation theory. No?
Do you think, though, that identity, or before identity, maybe it's power that is kind of navigating these things? Because a lot of times identities are used as a way to complicate this more, or as a way to politicize, weaponize So it's a kind of a violence when you use identities, categories, labels as a way to, represent or also misrepresent people.
I think that power is everywhere, everywhere. So we cannot not to deal with power. We cannot work, for example, in identity without dealing with power. We cannot work with historical issues without dealing with power. But power is everywhere, but power is not everything.
Thank you.
I would add something to what Subhas was saying somehow, and on this parallelism, that there is the issue of commitment somehow in relation to the favorization. So in decolonial there is this deconstruction somehow. It's not just accepting that there is a construction or reconstruction, but how to construct. So how to use the theory somehow to make an action in a reality. You understand?
I think so. I think I understand, but from my point of view, people with which we are working, groups, social groups, people from social groups, they are not using our theory. They are not using our tools. So it's to us to adapt ourselves to their own problems, to their own reality, to their own ways of living things, to express them. People outside the University of Aix-en-Provence, of Lyon 2, of the HESS in Paris, of different institutions, the University of Geneva, I don't know, they are not using social reps. We are using social reps. We are using this kind of tool. So it's to us to adapt ourselves to the ways people live in problems, express problems, write about problems, for example, writing or making images about these problems. I don't know if that was clear or not.
Okay, but so it's okay, we are clear, but when we adapt, it seems that we are just observing, but there are also
We are, sorry,
observing. So we adapt to understand, we adapt to observe. But from the other part, when you use any kind of methodology, you also intervene. So you have an effect when you are going in anywhere. I was working with gypsies, and so you disrupt, and you are part of that co-construction as a researcher too. So you have power in that position a lot of time, and you have also, do you have the consciousness what to do with that power? That was somehow my question.
Absolutely, it's extremely important also to have a critical look, an idea of yourself, of ourselves. Because we have also, in the eyes of others, some kind of power. Absolutely, yes, absolutely. In the ways we are observing people, in the ways we are making interviews, for example, with others, individual or collective interviews, of course, this power. Yes, of course, of course. It's extremely important. And we have to use some tools for this. And we have to have an autocritical idea of ourselves, yes, absolutely.
There are a couple of things I was reflecting before, especially based on the observations that Professor Sadik made. It's too low, my voice is a bit tired, so. The voice. It's too low. Okay. Now, can you hear me?
Yes?
Yes. No, as I was saying, I was doing a couple of reflections about what Professor Sadik said about history, the role of history, and at the same time what Subhas, my colleague, was saying about tensions. So trying to look at tensions, I don't know if I understood correctly your intervention, but looking at tensions in how we study and how we use of the theory, social representations theory. And especially for research interests, we were talking about power, right? And this idea that you were talking about, that power is everywhere, I don't necessarily agree with this, because on some point, of course, we can say that there are acts of power in many things, right? But if we have to understand social change, so that the possibility of social groups to build change, this idea of the granularity of power, that power is everywhere, and also that tensions are everywhere, it means that they're also nowhere, no? So there should be, in my opinion, something that I'm also trying to understand. If there is to build some kind of research agenda to understand the world now and to act on the world now, we have also to understand, in my opinion, which kind of phenomena we have to look at when it comes to tensions, when it comes to power, and the capacity of social groups to build change, no? To make history in some kind of ways, to understand history now, and not only in the past. No? For example, the presentations today of my colleague is trying to integrate future studies with social representations theory. Also the capacity of social groups to imagine future, to interpret future, and to build alternatives. No? I put a lot of things into it, but it seems to me that not only social representations theory, which I'm already studying, so but also in social sciences in general, there is this tendency to be observant and to look at granularities and not at tendential processes, no? So I wanted to know, what do you think about the potential of the theory in this sense? I don't know if I made myself clear. I'm always a mess, so I'm sorry.
No. Thank you for your intervention. It is for not only for me, but what I try to present is the fact that our theories representation of objects are tensional, all of them. We are not working on social representations of stilo, or we are not working on social representation of a small thing. When we are working in social representation of some complex system, some complex object, as health, as identity, as kinship, we have a very holistic and very tensional object.
Yes.
First of all. Secondly, about social change. I'm a little bit pessimistic on this. I mean that in social psychologists, maybe sociologists also, some of them not at all, not really, but I think that we are arriving after social change. We are not dealing with social change in the moment of the change. We are dealing with social change after the social change arrived. Most of the times. And we must be a little bit naive, I think, I'm saying this for myself, thinking that social change can be effective without power. I mean, social change is there in order to take the power, for example.
Yeah.
In order to have the power, to take the power. So, we kind of you're right, if power is there anywhere, we can find it nowhere, but we can have the idea, working with real complex social objects, that the question of power is extremely, but extremely important.
Yeah, in my opinion, it can be also very more operativized, more clear, identifiable, no? Like the idea that it's not necessarily, but I'm very long about this, you disagree with I mean, if we have to build this research agenda, at least, there are some kind of things that we can reason about. No, there's a huge literature on power, of course, and how to operativize also the concept of power while doing research, no? Of course, not all authors agree on what power is, and it's also very much fractured concept, I would say, one of the most complicated concepts. But at the same time, if you have to understand, make sense of what's going on now, and if you have to look at tension with the direction, at least trying to understand the tendency in which society is moving. No? There's the need to build an agenda that has clear in which forms power is operating now. No? This doesn't mean that you can predict social change and that you interpret social change day by day, also because research requires time, no? And reflection. But at the same time, there's the need, in my opinion, to understand, no? What I said before.
Yeah, personally, I'm not very, I am extremely critical with prediction in social science. I don't believe that we can predict things. Let's try to understand them already, but predict them is extremely difficult.
I wasn't talking about prediction. I wasn't talking about prediction. By the way, okay, I talked too much, I think. Thank you so much for your answers.
Thank you, thank you.
Any other question?
No? So, thank you so much, Nikos, for the communication. Thank you, all of you. Bye.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Ciao, bye.